Hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is a personal video because at some point I'm going to make a video about this that's more explanatory. But I just kind of want to make a description of some things or make an explanation of some things that have been troubling me the past 2 years. So I was fairly young. Not really too young. I was still, I was aware. I was old enough to be aware. And when September 11th happened. Now, where I grew up, September 11th was the end of the world. It was the apocalypse. It was the Bible's revelation story about to play out. Of course, I was young, and I was also in a small town. So, despite, what you might read in the book of Revelation, it was very much embellished with details of today. Or of, 21 years ago or 20 years ago. Now, what I never thought was I'd get to the point of where I am now. And that is, now that I'm an adult, I started asking questions about 9/11. Just looking on it and seeing a video just to remember 9/11 even. And seeing videos that were on it, like as far as just, images of the terrible images of people jumping from the buildings and understanding that in their minds it's so hot and unpleasant in those buildings where they are that rather than suffer through it any longer, they jumped. And it breaks my heart. And I've just been trying to understand it more and more. Not their plight, but understand what happened. Because clearly it wasn't the end of the world. I was very heavily involved in Christianity. I started willowing away kind of thing in my 20s, and it kind of came back as well. I tried to hold on to Christianity and whatnot, and I'd look at these videos and I'd read the comments and I'd see like little conspiracy theories here and there. And today it's rife with conspiracy theory. But at some point along the way, you start to believe the conspiracy theory, and you start to understand that, for one, the story that the government is telling you, it's never been proven, and there were some serious questions about the official government story. At some point along the way, you understand that the government's story of what happened on 9/11 is itself a conspiracy. It's the accepted one. It's the official position. That isn't to say it's incorrect, but it is to understand that until it's been proven, then, who's to say there's not a more valid explanation? And I say all that just because, at some point along the way, I came to believe a different story. Well, that's not the purpose of this video at this point. Because I don't really know what I believe, because there's some things I do think I believe about what happened on 9/11 that I think are very provable. But I don't want to accept. But with that, I would first like to tell you one important position that I think would at least invalidate millions of people's beliefs in the accepted story. That, some nationalists from Saudi Arabia, attacked some Muslim nationalists from Saudi Arabia, flew these planes in. And before I get there, or and I don't know when I'll make a video about what I actually think happened, because I'm afraid that the answer might just get you banned from YouTube. So instead, I want to attack it from a different angle. I want to come at it from a different angle, and it's a heartbreaking one. And it's one that would certainly ostracize me with a lot of people. And that is about the Christian view, the American Christian view of what happened on 9/11. You see, it's easy to hold to the view that, as a Christian, it would be easy to hold to the view that Muslims, attacked us because this country's free. Well, the country was free, in 99 or something. They attacked us because we're free and they hate our freedom. And it's easy when your enemy is not the people themselves, just as human beings, but instead is the devil. As of course, the devil, doesn't want you to be free. Now, there's some issues with that statement about the devil not wanting you to be free. And that is that, if you look at the Old Testament, if you read the Old Testament narrative, it's God who lays out the Mosaic law to bind people, to stick particularly the Jewish people, the ancient Jewish people, to the law of blessings and curses. That so long as they keep His commandments, they'll be blessed, and as long as they don't, they'll be cursed. And so, there's it's hard to believe it's so obvious that the Bible, or at least the New Testament's concern or treatment of the Bible, is, and I should say of the New Testament's concern and treatment of the Old Testament, is actually quite copacetic. And what I mean by that is, the New Testament is a capstone to the Old Testament. That's how it's written. It's meant to be a capstone. And this is important because understanding it in that light will invalidate the faith of billions of Christians throughout the globe. But it's obvious once you see it. It's hard to believe You miss it. So, with that, because my ultimate goal is to really get us to understand the plight we're in when it comes to the events of 9/11 and what we're really dealing with, and really bringing justice to the people who lost their lives, who were burning so hot without dying that they jumped instead of stick out the flames any longer. That I want you to understand that how the New Testament, or how the Bible itself is structured. So keep in mind that the Bible is structured, and you don't need to, but I would ask that right now you refrain from putting your suppositions on how the story of Jacob and Esau is really the story about Israel and the other nations, or Israel and Islam, or something like that, or Isaac and Ishmael is about Israel and Islam. Okay, I want you to stop your preconceptions of this, because those are things that came way after the fact. And so, or way after the stories themselves. And so, what you need to understand is in the Bible, there's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and there's the tree of life. And Adam and Eve chose to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and of course they will surely die. And that when Isaiah was prophesying, Isaiah prophesied of both the destruction of the northern kingdom of Israel. So keep in mind that David and Solomon had the united kingdom of Israel, and whenever Solomon died, it split apart. It became the northern kingdom, who was, according to the Bible itself, is that they were wicked. They chose to be wicked, and that means that they trespassed their covenant promise to be, or they trespassed the Mosaic covenant, and were subject to the law of blessings and curses. And the curse that they got as the northern kingdom was to be scattered. And that's what happened with the Assyrians. Is the Assyrians attacked them, and then that's whenever the northern 10 tribes disappeared, and you were left with Judah, which was Benjamin, and was it the Levites? Is that right? The priestly caste. And of course Judah, yeah, I think so. But basically, it was Benjamin and Judah, and that's where you get the kingdom of Judah from, and that's where you get the term Jew from in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. So Isaiah also prophesied of a time when they would be unified again. That it's also it's a prophecy of that. It's also that the Old Testament, or I should say that Genesis, the story of the brothers, and how Joseph saves the brothers as well, by the famine in Egypt, or the famine that was in Israel, and they had to leave, and Joseph saves them when they came to Egypt, but they had sold the brother into slavery. There was a warring going on between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Now, and I'm just spitballing here, so I'm not really trying to give you a 100% accurate explanation or something. I'm trying to give you the actual explanation of what's going on. And so what happens with the Old Testament is it culminates, according to the Christian Bible, or I should say the Protestant Bible, it stops before the quiet period. The quiet period is when you have the Maccabees. They're the first Hasmoneans. Is that right? Yeah, the Hasmoneans. They fight for Jewish independence from Antiochus Epiphanes, who is certainly most likely the one that Daniel was writing about when he was prophesying, or in his quote-unquote prophecy book. He was prophesying about Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a very evil man, at least as history is written by the winner, which would be the Hasmoneans. He was the heir to basically the what's it called, the Seleucid Alexandrian Empire, and that's where the abomination of desolation came in. He installed temples to Zeus, or he installed statues to Zeus in the temple, and that's whenever like the Hasmoneans revolted and they threw him out, and they gained their independence. Rome sent them a congratulations letter at the time it occurred, and for 100 years they had peace, or they had freedom. And then that's kind of the intertestamental period that all occurs, and then you have the birth of Jesus the Christ in the New Testament. And you also have the words, in the latter days your young men will dream dreams, and your old men will dream dreams, your young men will have visions, or something like that. And your young women will prophesy. Is that right? I can't quite remember. But John the Baptist spoke about, his message was that the axe is at the tree. It's ready to get cut down. And Jesus reads the words in the temple as an adult at the beginning of his ministry, and he says, "Today this reading has been fulfilled in your hearing." And so Jesus goes about, preaching, and he is, despite what you might have come to believe, he was a very apocalyptic preacher. He was preaching the end of the age, and that age was the Jewish age, the ancient Jewish age, the Mosaic law period. He was preaching the end of that was coming, and that the next age was going to be, or the new age to come, which was going to be the Christianity age, would be never ending. Now, what you must understand is that Jesus has very obvious statements about, very, very obvious teachings about what he's actually saying in the New Testament. And these are things that we just kind of gloss over because we have to rectify it with our Christian understanding of stuff. For one is, Jesus says, "I have sheep not of this fold." And some people go, "Well, yeah, he's talking about, everybody in the world." And then he says, or there's another spot where he says, "No, I've come only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel." And so people say, what is he talking about? Sheep not of this fold and only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. It's a pretty simple deduction from there that he's talking about the northern tribes that are lost. That's who he came for. He also tells, it's also the prediction of the high priest Caiaphas at the time. High priest Caiaphas, let's see. He says that Jesus should die not for that nation. He prophesied that Jesus should die for that nation, not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of God who were scattered abroad. It's clear he's talking about the 10 tribes plus the 2 in Judah. Now there's some other stuff that's going on there And this isn't meant to be, a 100% explanation of. So keep in mind, I'm not trying to give you the actual textbook answer of what's going on. I want to explain that these are the kind of things that people will come to realize, and it is going to have a huge impact on the world stage and politics, especially politics and our wars and 9/11, the understanding of 9/11. And so what Jesus also says is that this generation will not pass before all these things come true. And he talks about Jerusalem not one stone will be left unturned, or on top of another, I should say. And he says, these are all signs that he's talking about a period that's going to happen in his lifetime. He's not talking about 2,000 years from now. So, just to get you to understand what Jesus' time frame was, is that, once you understand these things, it becomes obvious that AD 70 was the period that Jesus was talking about, or that Jesus was referencing to. That was the period where that he was referring to when he prophesied. And this isn't to say that Jesus was actually alive, ever lived even. It's not to say that he was prophesying this back in 30 AD. It's not to say that either. It's to say his character is placed in the period of 30 AD. For whomever wrote those words that Jesus spoke, whoever the playwright is, their time period was 40 years before, a whole generation before. So what you need to understand is the New Testament is either historical nonfiction or it's historical fiction. But in either case, he's talking about people that lived at that time. So why is that important? Well, it's important because when you move on to Acts, and the Holy Spirit coming down, and the Holy Spirit teaching them in all the ways that Jesus has shown them, bringing in remembrance all the things that Jesus spoke to them, and calling out the flock, sheep not of this herd, calling those out. They hear the voice, and they hear me, and they know me. You got to understand it's a fairy tale at that point. It's not meant to be taken literally. Or maybe it is, but it's not for people today. It's meant to be that there's some supernatural power that both, like a magnet, it draws them out and it draws them to this message. Basically, it's the light shining in the dark and the moths come. Like what you'd see at a stadium. But who did Jesus reject? Well, Jesus rejected the Syrophoenician woman. She wasn't Jewish. She wasn't, quote unquote, Gentile either. Because what you don't realize, and this is a budding topic of research that's really gotten a strong foothold in the last 2-3 years especially, of we totally misunderstand the definition of a Gentile. The question is whether or not, who are these Gentiles? Like if we know that Jesus came only for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, then who is it that the apostles are going out to the ends of the earth to bring back in, or to bring back, or to bring in? Who are these wild olive branches that are being grafted in now? Well, they're the lost sheep. So how do they know who is a lost sheep and who isn't? It's by the Holy Spirit. As Cornelius, as Peter was talking to Cornelius, if it was Peter, we can see that you're one of ours, or one of the tribe. So, the takeaway is that the New Testament is a story about the gathering in of the elect people. Just keep in mind, they are elected also to come in. It's the story of the prodigal son. And the prodigal son are the two brothers. The brother is the two tribes that stayed home. The one that stayed home is the two tribes that stayed home. And then the prodigal son are the other tribes who were sent out, who were scattered, who chose to love the world. And they're being called back to reunify, to go live with Jesus in his mansion. And so then it makes sense about what's happening in 70 AD. Well, for people who understand the law of the blessings and curses, and who understand the great and terrible day of the Lord, which were these people that lived at this time, that were written, whenever Revelation was written, which was probably before the temple fell in 70 AD, but not much before. They were understanding that God's judgment was coming. That the great and terrible day of the Lord was coming to judge the wicked. And that's how the Bible is supposed to be read. That's how the New Testament is supposed to be read. It is a house that's being built up in the Old Testament, and then it's a roof of the New Testament. That's how the Christian Bible is meant to be read. What does that mean? It tells you plainly in Revelation, only 144,000 yet to sing the redemption song, 12,000 from each tribe. That's what it tells you. But it also tells you something else. Because here's the deal. You are not under the Mosaic law. You are not under some curse because you sinned. You're not guilty of some sin according to the Bible. According to the Bible. Because that whole story culminates, the Revelation story culminates with the New Jerusalem coming down, 12,000 entering in. Or not the 12,000, but the 144,000 coming in. And that's important. It's heartbreaking when you've followed Christianity all your life. But it's important because it then frees you to really kind of see the world clearly. Because if the Bible's not about you, then from where does Satan come? The answer is that Satan was an enemy. Now, granted, there's other religions that have their beliefs in good and evil and stuff, yes, but Satan as a character comes from Judaism, from ancient Judaism, and then he personifies a little bit in the New Testament, but then he's cast out in Revelation. But you got to understand that that Satan was particularly that the New Testament is particularly talking about the Jewish people, and Satan is particularly focused on the Jewish people in the Bible. That's in the Bible. Now, then it kind of makes sense that, why the Greeks never heard of Christianity or were never really concerned about becoming Jewish. The Romans were never concerned about it. The Anglo-Saxons were never really concerned about it. I mean, the Zoroastrians were never concerned about it. None of that. But anyway, so if you can understand this, I would recommend some channels like Jason DeCosta as part of this understanding, or looking up preterism as an eschatological view. I would recommend looking them up, doing some research, looking up those things, and doing some research. Look up ancient Israel only. Look up Israel only. I think that's a bad title. But when you understand that, it'll start to put things in a lot more perspective if you're really serious about understanding world events today. Because if Satan's really not a character we need to be concerned about today, then we need to revisit the question of why would Muslims attack us on 9/11? And how would they accomplish such a feat? Because the victims of 9/11 deserve it. Because the greatest crime of the century is still continuing today. And your kids will become victims of it. So with that, I'll stop this. I'll just look into it because I do think it's an amazing picture of what the New Testament's really about. Understanding it doesn't concern you. Like it took me decades to learn. The New Testament's not concerned about me. I'm not under any, as far as I'm aware, I'm not under any law that if I fail to obey would bring curses. Because God knows you wouldn't want to be under those curses. The curses of what happened in AD 70. The Mosaic Law. Judging the wicked. So, with that, just know and be happy. It's not about you. But at the same time, understand that leads us to a whole series of questions about, if there's no such thing as a Christian nation today because Christianity doesn't actually exist. That Christianity was really just a more isolated sect of Judaism that found its culmination in 70 AD whenever they mystically disappeared. At least according to the story. Then you need to find some identity of what your actual identity is. And understand that they don't hate us because of our freedom. Because that's a stupid idea that human beings who are not guided by Satan would be opposed to being free. So there'd be other reasons. There'd have to be other good reasons for them to attack us. Or perhaps you come to understand that they're not the ones who attacked us. Anyway, take care. I wish you well. And maybe eventually I'll follow this up with what I think is really happening. But I've got a lot more questions to get answered first. Bye.